Hey, what's happening, y'all? Welcome back to the Media Goose channel. It is I, the Media Goose, your friend Ryan, and the goose is loose, baby. And I'm coming at you today with another NFL video. I told you I was coming at you with my NFL offseason reactions, so here we are with buy or sell. I am going to tell you whether I'm buying an offseason of a team or I'm selling the offseason of a team. I think I was going to do grades, but grades are a little, I don't know, it's a very kind of linear thing, and I think off seasons are a little bit more fluid than that. Let me first say, I am not an expert necessarily. I also don't mean to antagonize any fan bases. I'm just sharing my honest opinions on things. If I say something about your favorite team, just know I'm not trying to be disrespectful of the people involved or fan bases or anything like that. I'm just giving my thoughts on the teams and what they did. So I hope nobody takes anything personally. And in addition to that, I'm going to talk about additions, subtractions, the draft. I might not touch on the draft for every team, but I'll at least give you the grade that I gave them for their draft. And I'll use the link for my draft grades. I'll drop that down in the comments as well. I have a full draft grades for the NFC and AFC as separate videos. That's what I'm going to do here. And today I'm starting with the NFC. Last time when I did the draft, I ended on the NFC East. So I am going to begin with the NFC East today, specifically my New York Giants. So when we talk about the players that the Giants lost, there's really not a name that scares me. Wan'Dale Robinson is gone. Daniel Bellinger is gone. Dexter Lawrence got traded. That hurts a little bit, but with how everything went last year with Dexter and all of the stuff that was said about him and his attitude, I'm happy he's gone, frankly. Bobby Okereke, he really diminished in play over his last year. Cordell Flott and Dane Belton. I think the only two players the Giants have lost who have a chance to get better are Dane Belton and Cordell Flott. And Dane Belton doesn't really have a spot to start on this team. And Cordell Flott, I wouldn't have minded if they kept him, but I also know he's small. And I don't know if that fits the way the new Giants are going to want to play defense. So, let's talk about additions. They re-signed Jermaine Illuminor, which is huge. Best right tackle we've had in a long time. Isaiah Likely coming in at tight end. There have been some reports coming out from Giants reporters that Likely may not be used in the slot as often as has been hypothesized by fans and reporters. I don't mind. I think we have a lot of guys who can play the slot, honestly. If Malik is healthy, Malachi Fields has a big slot. I think Theo Johnson could go in the slot. Darnell Mooney, Calvin Austin. We got a lot of options. We added good offensive line depth, I thought, with Lucas Patrick and Daniel Falele. Then on defense, we bring in DJ Reader, Shelby Harris, Tremaine Edmonds, Ardarius Washington, and there are other kind of on the fringes signings. And then I'm going to mention the first four players the Giants picked, who are Arvell Reese, CeCe Mauigoa, Colton Hood, and Malachi Fields. This shouldn't come as a surprise to anybody. I am 100% buying the New York Giants offseason. I think John Harbaugh is going to just totally change the mentality of this football team. I think the offseason he had reflects the kind of team he wants this to be in the way that he really bulked up both the offensive and defensive lines. And I like a lot of the additions around the edges of the roster being from Baltimore so they can help kind of implement the system with Harbaugh. And overall, while I'm not expecting the Giants to jump into the playoffs necessarily, unless things really break their way, this is a step in the right direction. Even if the Giants win 7 or 8 games this year, that is a win from what they have been for the last decade, it feels like. So I am buying the New York Giants offseason. Now we go on to the Dallas Cowboys. For the first few teams, I'm going to be looking at my laptop for the key addition or subtractions because I didn't write that down initially. Dallas, in terms of who they lost, Jadeveon Clowney, Dante Fowler, Osa Odigizua, Solomon Thomas, Jack Sanborn, and Logan Wilson. But now for their additions, they tagged George Pickens. They re-signed Javonte Williams, who had a really good year. Both of them did. They bring in Marquez Valdez-Scantling as a depth guy at receiver. And on defense, they improved so much on a unit that really needed this kind of attention. Overall, they brought in Rashawn Gary, who I've seen knocked as like past his prime, and maybe that's true, but if this guy contributes like 6 to 10 sacks, it's going to be an improvement over what they had, I believe. Then they brought in D. Winters in a trade. They signed Jalen Thompson. So those three players all could make an impact on this defense. And for their draft, I had graded them. I think I gave them the highest grade in the league, didn't I? A+. Yeah, I gave the Dallas Cowboys an A+ in the draft with specifically Caleb Downs and Malachi Lawrence. I'm absolutely buying the Dallas Cowboys this year. I think it's possible they're a Super Bowl team, unfortunately, because obviously I'm a Giants fan. But I just really believe in everything they've done this offseason. I think Caleb Downs could be an all-pro year one. I think that Malachi Lawrence will develop. I really like what Dallas did, and if they can stay healthy, they should probably run away with this division. Then I have the Washington Commanders. They lost a lot of players, but I don't think a lot of them were key contributors. I would say the biggest loss would probably be Tyler Biadasz, which I don't even know why they cut him, frankly. But in terms of additions, they brought in Rachaad White and Jerome Ford at running back. They brought in Chigakonkwo, and they kept Chris Paul at guard. Then on defense, they brought in a lot. They brought in, Charles Omenihu, Kaylavon Chason, Odafe Owe, Tim Settle, Amik Robertson, and Nick Cross. I really like the Nick Cross addition. They brought in a lot of guys on that defensive line and pass rush unit. Tim Settle as a defensive tackle as well. And for the draft, I had given them an A because Sonny Styles, Antonio Williams, Josh Josephs, I just think they got great value. And for the Commanders, I'm buying their offseason. I don't know if that's going to directly translate into wins, but to me, this kind of reminds me of New England's offseason from last year in some ways, in that they brought in a lot of ready to contribute on the defense right now kind of guys. Sonny Styles in the middle of the defense, he could be a defensive player, a defensive rookie of the year contender. Styles and Arvell Reese could be competing for that award. So I am buying the Commanders offseason. And I think they could compete for a wild card. Then, last for the NFC East, I have the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the biggest story for the Eagles this offseason was their inability to bring in an offensive coordinator. They got Sean Mannion, I think, but they were attached to a lot of big-name coordinators who turned them down. The Giants got scrutinized for the Matt Nagy hire, but they interviewed Nagy, couldn't land him. They couldn't land... My God, there was just a ton of big-name people that the Eagles didn't land. I tend to believe that's the fact that I don't think a lot of coordinators around the league want to work with Jalen Hurts. I think it's possible that if the Eagles fall out of the playoffs this year, Howie Roseman seems to me like the kind of guy who won't have the problem pulling a plug on a quarterback. I think if the Eagles fall out of the playoffs, we could see Sirianni gone and Jalen Hurts out of there. And that might be crazy. I'm sorry if that pisses Philly fans off, but I could just see them deciding they want kind of like a CEO head coach rather than Sirianni, who seems to rub some coordinators the wrong way potentially. I get that Philly loves him, but he doesn't have a sterling reputation around the league. But getting into their subtractions, I don't think they lost a lot. I mean, Brandon Graham sucks, but he was getting older anyway. Nakobe Dean and Jalen Phillips and Josh Uche are probably their biggest losses. In terms of additions, they brought in Damon Pierce, Marquise Brown, Datavion Wicks, and Elijah Moore on offense. Those are all people that could contribute well. They also drafted Mackay Lemon and Eli Stowers, so they could contribute pretty quickly on offense. They're likely going to move A.J. Brown because they just don't utilize him enough for the value he's capable of bringing. And I think those guys will fill in nicely around Devontae Smith. And on defense, they brought in Jonathan Grenard as well as Reek Woolen. The Eagles, I'm pushing their offseason. This is one of the only teams I'm pushing. It's push close to sell. But because of the amount of success the Eagles consistently have, I can't full-on sell this offseason. I do think there's a chance that they stay relevant and are competing with Dallas for the division and a wild card team. But I do think there's a scenario where the bottom falls out of this. If I didn't mention him, they also brought in Jonathan Grenard, who I think will contribute. They lost Jalen Phillips because they couldn't afford him because the Panthers paid him a lot. But Grenard was a good value signing. So I think the Philadelphia Eagles, it's a push of an offseason. It's not an offseason I fully buy, but I can't sell it either. I think they may have maintained where they are. But if I had to go one way or another, I would sell it. Now we are moving on to the NFC North. The NFC North, the Chicago Bears, I'm going to start off with. Two of their major subtractions are Tremaine Edmonds and DJ Moore. Who else did they lose? They lost a lot of on the fringes of the rosters guys. Drew Dahlman retiring was unexpected, and I think that does hurt. They lost some guys on their defensive line, but none of them were contributing at a huge level, so I don't think they're upset. But they do end up losing Kevin Byard, Jaquan Brisker, not Briskers. Those are two good safeties. But now getting into the additions, they brought in Dylan Thieneman in the draft. In the draft, I had given the Bears a B+. So they replaced those safeties they lost with Dylan Thieneman and Kobe Bryant, a Seattle Seahawk, who I think is a great signing for the Bears. They brought in Logan Jones and Garrett Bradbury as center options. They bring in Jedrick Wills in case they decide that their left tackle isn't up to snuff. So they gave themselves a lot of options. I ended up putting down push for the Bears, but it's a push that is closer to me buying it, where I was closer to selling the Eagles. I think the Bears could improve simply from their young players developing. Caleb could take that next step. I think that, who's that wide receiver? Luther Burden could take a step. I like Rome Odunze. I don't think losing DJ Moore will end up hurting them that much. They replaced Tremaine Edmonds with Devin Bush. Ultimately, it's a push for the Bears, but I'm closer to buying it, and I think they'll still be competing for the NFC North title. And the way I see the rest of the NFC North, it might not be a competition. They may very comfortably win 11 or 12 games and win with a 3 or 4 game lead by the end of the year. Now, the Detroit Lions. Oof, they lost a lot on their team. They lost. The list of players they lost is 20 long. Now it's just a matter of how many of those guys are essential. Taylor Decker's a huge loss. Graham Glasgow, Marquise Davenport, Roy Lopez, DJ Reader, Alex Anzalone, which is a huge loss, Amik Robertson. I'm selling the Lions offseason. And for the draft, I had given them a B-. Blake Miller coming in at right tackle. I think they reached on a couple of Michigan players, and they lost a shit ton. In terms of additions, they brought in Isaiah Pacheco to back up Jahmyr Gibbs, who is going to see a vast improvement due to the lack of David Montgomery, Tyler Conklin at tight end, Cade Mays at center, Juice Scruggs, and Larry Borum. I don't like what I see for Detroit, so I'm selling. I think they're going to take a step back this year. I mean, they took a step back last year. I think they missed the playoffs, but I just don't feel confident in that offseason at all. I think they lost a lot more than they gained, and I think they lost some key players. In particular, that defense. They're going to take a step back, in my opinion. So I am selling the Detroit Lions offseason. Now, the Minnesota Vikings. The Vikings, I gave a C+ in the draft, and they lost Jonathan Allen, Javon Hargrave, Jonathan Grenard, Jalen Naylor, Harrison Smith, and is that it? I think it is. They lost. That's it. Okay. And for additions, they brought in James Pierre at cornerback. They brought in Kyler Murray, obviously, who I do think is an improvement over J.J. McCarthy. I didn't think J.J. was better than a second or third round pick, so where they drafted him was crazy in my opinion. And I do think Kyler will be a marked improvement over J.J. But I'm still selling this offseason. With the draft, they kind of reached on Caleb Banks. The C+ I gave them. There's some decent players, but I don't see anybody that's going to make an immediate impact this year. And this could be the end of, who's their head coach? Kevin O'Connell, who's one of the best with quarterbacks in the league. But if they don't make the playoffs this year, will the Vikings decide to move on? I don't know. I think there is an outcome of this where Kyler stays healthy, Justin Jefferson stays healthy, Jordan Addison keeps his head on straight, and it goes well, because they did also bring in Jawan Jennings, who could be good, who could contribute. There is a possibility of this going well, but I just don't think they did enough, frankly, and I think their defensive line and pass rush could really see a regression this year. Now for the Green Bay Packers, they got an A- from me in the draft, which I saw much lower grades for them, but I just like the players they got. And in terms of the players they lost Ontavian Wicks. They cut Nate Hobbs, who they gave a massive contract to. They lost Rasheed Walker, Quay Walker, Romeo Dobbs. The only additions they made were Javon Hargrave and Jair Franklin. I'm selling the Packers offseason in terms of making them better immediately. Micah's missing part of the beginning of the year, and they gave up a lot to get him, so that's going to suck for them. I also think their offensive line is going to take a significant step back this year. They also lost Jenkins, who they were kind of playing out of position, and Rasheed Walker's gone. I just don't know about the Packers right now. I think they could take a step back and miss the playoffs and maybe be a top 10 pick. Because let me pull up what other addition or losses. So the Nate Hobbs thing blew up in their face, and when you consider that they had cut Eric Stokes, who went on to break out as a Raider, that makes them look even worse. So yeah, I'm selling the Packers offseason. Now, for the NFC South, for the Falcons, I gave them a C+ in the draft. They lost Tyler Algier, Darnell Mooney, Caleb McGarry, and they tagged Kyle Pitts. They only brought in Tua and Jawan Taylor. I'm selling the Falcons offseason. I would not be very excited if I were a Falcons fan. I don't know that Michael Penix is going to be around much longer because he didn't look great and they brought in Tua, who's probably going to beat him out because I don't know if he's going to be healthy, and they'll probably err on the side of caution and go with Tua at the beginning. And if Tua plays well, Penix might not get back in. They might just trade him. But I think they needed more weapons on offense as well, if I'm being honest. And they could be drafting a quarterback in the top 5 and looking for another coach within a year or two. I don't feel good about this offseason. Buccaneers. I gave them an A in the draft. They lost Mike Evans and Rachaad White. That sucks, undoubtedly. And they added Kenneth Gainwell, Alex Anzalone, and A'Shawn Robinson as primary pieces. This is a push that I'm kind of leaning towards buying, and it might just be because I like Baker Mayfield, and I liked their draft a lot. And honestly, with the NFC South is just really hard to predict. I feel like you could list them in any order, and there's an argument to be made. But I'm pushing the Buccaneers with a lean towards buying, because even though they lost Mike Evans, I mean, they have Chris Godwin, they have the rookie from Ohio State, Emeka Egbuka. They re-signed Cade Otton. Kenneth Gainwell is going to be really good for Baker Mayfield as a receiving back out of the backfield. So I think the Bucs are going to be competitive. I don't see them completely falling out. So I think it's a push that could inch into a buy. And now the Panthers, who lost Rico Dowdle, Hunter Renfrow, A'Shawn Robinson, and Cade Mays. They brought in Kenny Pickett and A.J. Dillon as depth, John Mechie as depth. Rasheed Walker could be the starting left tackle as Ike Ekwonu gets healed up from his injury. And I gave them an A- in the draft. And in terms of other additions, they also signed Jalen Phillips. I like it. You gotta take chances to get pass rushers. And they missed out on the D tackle that ended up, I think, going to the Patriots. Is that Milton Williams? They missed out on giving him a huge payday. So that was last year. So this year they go and they try to bring in Jalen Phillips. And they also bring in Devin Lloyd. I'm buying this offseason. I really like what they did. I liked how they looked at the end of the year last year. I kind of feel like they could be a sneaky wild card team. I think there's also a chance they could crash and burn, and I could look bad here, but maybe they're a sell. I'm going to say buy. I'm going to go with buy. It's a hard one, but I just like Walker, Lloyd, and Phillips, and their draft I liked as well. So I'm going to go with a buy on the Panthers, knowing it's risky. Then I've got the New Orleans Saints. So their losses include Taysom Hill, Cam Jordan, Demario Davis, and they got a B+ in the draft from me. Their biggest additions, David Edwards, good guard signing, Travis Etienne. I think that's how you pronounce his name. It's not ETN like we've all been saying for years. It's Etienne, apparently. Then they also got Caden Ellis. Are there any big losses for the Saints that I'm missing? Not really. I mean, they lost Jonathan Bullard, but I don't think that's a huge loss. In terms of their draft, I like Jordan Tyson, Christian Miller, and Oscar Delp. Yeah, I'm buying the Saints offseason. I think this is a good offseason in terms of the way they built around Tyler Shough. I don't know what he is yet. I think him and Jackson Dart are kind of close in quality. I like Dart a little bit more, but I like what they're doing. I think they've set themselves up in a place where if at the end of this year they decide Tyler Shough is not the guy, they have a good foundation around what they'd be drafting the next guy to come into. So I'm buying the Saints offseason. And with how much parity there is in the NFC South, the Saints could be first or last, as could every team in this division. So now, y'all, we are on the last division, the NFC West. For the Cardinals, I gave them a C or C+ in the draft, and I'm selling this. before I even get into it, I'm selling this. Taking Jeremiah Love, despite everything they had invested in the running back room already, bringing in Tyler Algier, having... They have like the most expensive running back room in football, which is insane. They lost some offensive line help with Kelvin Beachum, Jonah Williams, and Hernandez, the guard the Giants drafted years ago. And they lost Calais Campbell and Dalvin Tomlinson. Good depth on the defensive line. In terms of additions, they brought in Gardner Minshew to compete with Jacoby Brissett. They added Tyler Algier and Kendrick Bourne and Isaac Seumalo, which is a solid guard. Elijah Wilkerson is their right tackle. That's a place that a lot of people thought they should have addressed instead of Jeremiah Love, and it's hard because if they took Mawanoa there at 3, it might have been a reach, but I'm thrilled the Giants got him at 10. So, but ultimately, I'm kind of selling the Cardinals offseason. Carson Beck was a reach. It's the first year of a new regime, so if there was ever a time to tear it down, it's now. But I don't like a lot of the things they did in terms of setting themselves up for long-term success. Going with, when the Giants took Saquon second overall, they were at least trying to extend a veteran quarterback's window in Eli. Jeremiah Love is going to be like having a piece of fine china on like a fucking folding table. Like, it doesn't make sense. The two things don't go together. Now we are with the Rams. They lost Rob Havenstein because he retired. I didn't write down a lot of their subtractions, so I'm guessing there weren't any glaring ones. Yeah, no, I don't see anybody that they lost that I'm like, oh my God, how are they going to replace them? They brought in Trent McDuffie and Jalen Watson, which were great. They get a future quarterback. I gave them a C for the draft, but I think I might have been lowballing them. I think it's more like a C plus B minus. I think the Rams are a push, but it's not a bad thing because they're still competing for winning this division and arguably winning the Super Bowl. If Devontae Adams and Puka play a full season and all of the tight ends they have, I think the Rams are a Super Bowl contender. They didn't have to do a lot, but they shored up their biggest weakness in the cornerback room by bringing in McDuffie and Watson, the Chiefs cornerbacks. So it's a push in terms of the offseason, but I am still buying the Rams as a Super Bowl contender. They also signed Matt Stafford, and they have him for 2 more years, which kind of makes you think, well, then why the hell did you take Ty Simpson? But it's the Rams. They're what the Jaguars think they are in the way that they draft. The Rams actually are. Like, I'll trust whatever they do because McVay and Les Snead, look what this team is. They're consistent every year. So the Rams are a Super Bowl contender. Now we've got the 49ers, who I gave a B- for their draft. They lost Brian Robinson, Kendrick Bourne, Jawan Jennings, and D. Winters, but they brought in Mike Evans, Christian Kirk for the wide receiver room. They brought in Osa Odigizua and Dre Greenlaw. He's back now. And they signed Nate Hobbs, who got that big deal with the Packers he didn't live up to. That feels like a player who could really bounce back for the Niners. And I think same with Greenlaw. It didn't really work out for the Broncos, but he was nicked up. He wasn't ever really fully healthy. So he's back where he's comfortable, and I could see him returning to form. I'm buying the Niners offseason, kind of for similar reasons I said for the Rams. These guys know what they're doing. They're year in and year out pretty consistent in their processes and in their professionalism and things like that. So I think the Niners, they're one of the most unlucky teams of the last 5 years, maybe even 10 years. The fact that Kyle Shanahan doesn't have a ring is kind of wild. Them and the Chiefs may be the most unlucky team over the last 5 years. And I say the Chiefs because the way they've been scheduled over the last 2 years has almost made it impossible for them to live up to what they were kind of crowned to be. The league has directly set up the Chiefs to not become a dynasty, whether they realize it or not, in the way that they scheduled them and beat the shit out of Pat Mahomes for a few years. But besides the point, I'm buying the Niners because if they ever just have a healthy year, they'll be in the NFC title game again. And finally, the last team of the NFC, we are talking about the Super Bowl champion Seattle Seahawks. The beautiful thing about winning the Super Bowl is you can kind of take it easy with the offseason you have. They don't have to go all in or tear anything down. They just won the Super Bowl. And they're one of the more unexpected Super Bowl winners that I can remember. They only lost Kobe Bryant, Reek Woolen, Boye Mafe. Those are 3 starters on their defense. And they lost Kenneth Walker. But they brought in Jadarian Price in the draft. I gave them a B for their draft. And they re-signed Rasheed Walker, and they also brought in Dante Fowler. I'm buying the Seahawks offseason just because I don't think they had to do a lot. They have a defensive genius at head coach, despite the fact of what they lost on the defensive side. Let me pull up their draft and talk about some players. Where are the Seahawks? I like Julian Neal coming in. He could play in the Reek Woolen spot. Bud Clark, I like a lot at safety. Bo Stevens as a potential guard. And as I mentioned, Jadarian Price. He could be a sleeper for Rookie of the Year, honestly. So I'm buying the Seahawks offseason, and I think they'll be in it with this division and at least competing for the wild card. I think they have it hard having to be in the division with the Niners and Rams, but I kind of put them in a similar grouping as those two teams with how good they did last year. So, I'm buying the Seahawks, I'm buying the Niners, I am pushing on the Rams, leaning towards a buy, I am selling the Cardinals, I am buying the Saints, buying the Panthers, pushing on the Buccaneers, but it's leaning to buying. I am selling the Falcons. I am selling the Packers. I am selling the Vikings. I am selling the Lions. I said I was pushing for the Bears. I'm buying. I think the Bears are going to be good. It was a push for the Commanders, but I could see them. Or no, it was a push for the Eagles. But again, they could win 12 games and I wouldn't be shocked. The Commanders I'm buying, the Cowboys I'm buying as a Super Bowl contender, and the Giants I'm buying as taking a step in the right direction for the first time in almost a decade. So y'all, let me know what you thought of my reaction to the NFC teams off seasons and give me your comments down below. If you disagree with some of my assessments, let's have a conversation. Please don't be aggressive. I don't want to have to block people or ignore comments. I'm not trying to start arguments. I just want to talk about football with people. So, with that being said, the Goose is out.